Yes, thank you very much. So I'm going to share a story that has a point to it and some critical components of what I've uncovered in the last 35 years of doing work with this methodology that I uncovered. I didn't really make it up. I recognized what it is we do when things really work. You've all experienced stress-free productivity sometime in your life where time disappeared and you were just on and you were present with what was going on. That's a nice place to be. Many times people experience that in random moments. I will suggest it's possible to be experiencing that as the new normal. But that's challenging in the kind of world that we're in these days. People often ask me what's new in the world in these 35 years I've been doing this work. And obviously technology is new to some degree, but the issues are the same as they've always been in terms of how do I stay focused, how do I stay in control of what I'm doing. There's nothing new except how frequently things are new. That's what's new, is how frequently things are new. I'd be willing to bet you everyone in the room here in the next 3 weeks is going to have some surprise happen in your life that will totally change what you think your priorities are. What technology has done is increase speed, volume, and connectivity. And that's not stopping. Do you think you're going to get any fewer emails next year than this year? Do you think you're going to get fewer WhatsApps or messages next year than this year? I don't think so. So what's new is the volume of stuff that we need to take in, absorb, integrate, and then challenge us to refocus and recalibrate and restructure what we're doing because of new input. How often did your parents have to totally change their life and their lifestyle? Depends, obviously. But maybe 2 or 3 times in their lives on average, they had to totally give it up, reintegrate, refocus in order to stay in control. Probably most of us in this room, that will happen every year. So what's new is the kinds of behaviors that we all need to start to integrate with ourselves and best practices that will make it much easier to surf on top of the game. Much easier. So let me tell you the story. Quite a number of years ago, I had a new sailboat and a new girlfriend. And took my new girlfriend on my new sailboat. That was a picture I took of her while she was on the boat. And at the time we were living in Santa Barbara, California. And we took my new sailboat to an island a few miles off the coast of Santa Barbara called Santa Cruz Island. It's a beautiful island, but it's very rugged, very sheer cliffs, and it's in an area that they refer to as the Windy Channel. The Olympic sailors train in this area for heavy weather. But my new sailboat, and I'm a new sailor, and I'm feeling all proud. So we sailed, and then as evening came, we found a small cove to anchor in. We anchored in the small cove, and there were quite a number of other sailboats there too. It was a holiday weekend. So we had to anchor very close in against other boats. An anchor in the front, an anchor in the back. To keep the boat stable, went below to cook dinner, We're fixing dinner, and then a strange thing happened. I had the weird feeling the boat was moving more than it should. So indeed, the wind had picked up, was blowing down a canyon and forcing the boat to move so much that it lifted one of the anchors. Now, when you lose an anchor gripping in a small harbor and the wind is very high, that's pretty dangerous. So I started up the engine to get some control of the boat. And of course, I ran over the anchor rope, which then and we call it fouling the prop. That means I had no more motor. The prop was tangled in the rope. So now we're at the mercy of the wind. The wind is taking us out, blowing us out toward the ocean, and the winds were pretty heavy in the ocean. So the boat was loose. I couldn't navigate it, and the wind started blowing us down the coast, very close to the cliffs. I had to radio the Coast Guard to save us. Their boat that could handle the heavy weather seas was 3 hours away. So we managed to move down the coast in the wind, and by the way, the major sail broke because of the wind was so heavy. And pretty much the boat and even our lives were in danger. We were ready to go overboard if we had to, and hope we survived. And amidst all of that, at one point, we looked up in the sky, and believe it or not, there was a full moon. And it was so magical and so mystical, it's sort of like we lost fear, we lost anything. We got into our zone, if you will, and very much appreciated a total presence of moment, a total sense of mystery, wonderfully so. Now, I tell you this story because, in truth, in a crisis, there's a kind of a serenity that can emerge for you. You've all probably experienced that at some point. Any of you ever been in a situation that was so critical that you kind of moved into your zone and got very present with what was going on? What strange things happen in a crisis is that it creates a kind of a relaxation. Why? It eliminates all your options. You don't have the stress of opportunity anymore. You have one focus called live, right? You have one focus called what's the next thing I do in order to live. So issues about your taxes or relationships or what you're going to cook for dinner, all of that disappears. You have none of that kind of stress. What's interesting is that if you're not in a crisis, there's another kind of stress that emerges, which is all the demons at the gate come rushing through. You could do this. Oh my God, you could do this. And you could do this too. Oh, but what about that? Yeah, but I have to do those. But I have to work out. Yeah, but I also have to, oh my God. And much of the stress these days is the stress of opportunity. There are so many things you could be doing instead of listening to me right now. How many things are not getting done right now? Most of you have between 30 and 100 projects, by the way, by my broad definition, meaning things you're committed to complete that are going to take more than one action to complete. Your next vacation, researching the new equipment that you might need, hiring the vice president that you probably need, figuring out what to do about the tooth that hurts. So in this room, with just the very few people that are in this room, there are about 3,000 projects not getting done right now. So how comfortable do you feel about that? Now, let me suggest to you that even though my book is called Getting Things Done, here's a big secret. And only because you're such gorgeous people, I'm going to share a secret with you. But don't tell anybody else, please. Getting things done is not so much about getting things done. It's really about being appropriately engaged with all of the commitments in your life so that you're present with whatever you're doing. So there's nothing on your mind except what's on your mind. How many of you in here, while even the short time that she and I have been talking, have had your mind go somewhere that has nothing to do with what's going on in this room? How many, come on, fess up, how many have had your mind go somewhere else? Now, I don't care, but you might. Where did you go when you left psychologically? If where you went in your mind was doing creative, developmental thinking down path that your brain had never been before, that was actually adding value to what you were thinking about, I'd say, whoa, stay there. That's a great place for your mind to go. It's not where most of you went. Where did you go? I will suggest that where most of your minds went when you left the room here is to something you are not yet appropriately engaged with. Something that still needs a decision made. Something that still needs some result of that thinking and decision making parked somewhere that you trust or with someone you trust. That's why it's on your mind. So you're not fully present because some part of you is trying to do something else that you haven't finished yet in terms of your thinking. That makes sense? You don't have to go very far to see where to apply what I'm talking about. Just start to pay attention to what has your attention. And then ask yourself, why? And what would I need to do to get that off my mind? So again, it's not so much about getting things done so much as it's about being appropriately engaged. Are you appropriately engaged with your company right now? Are you appropriately engaged with your health right now? Are you appropriately engaged with your dog or your kids or your car or your career or whatever? And appropriate engagement doesn't mean that you're finishing all that. It just means that whatever your relationship is with it is on what I refer to as cruise control. You know, like in a car, you put cruise control on and it sort of runs automatically. You don't have to think too much about it. So getting your life onto cruise control is a lot of what the methodology is that I uncovered and discovered. Basically how to do that. Now a lot of people say, oh David, you know, I could be appropriately engaged if I had more time. Right. More time. Everybody thinks they want more time. Isn't it nice, by the way, that you only have 24 hours a day? What if you had 26 hours a day? You'd have 2 more hours of what you've got. How much time does it take to have a good idea, by the way? 0. How much time does it take to be strategic? 0. How much time does it take to be creative? Innovative? How much time does it take to be loving and present with whatever you're doing? 0. Those do not require time. They do require something very important. What's that? You need room. If your brain is wrapped around 2 meetings ago, worrying about it, not knowing exactly how to engage with whatever happened with that, it's very hard to be present cooking spaghetti. It's very hard to be strategic in your meeting. It's very hard to just be fully available for whatever the person is that you're trying to communicate with, because there's a part of you trying to do something else at that point. You don't need time, you need room. So the issue is, or the opportunity is, to find out, how do you get room? What do you do? Well, let me suggest to you that if you don't have that room, what happens is that you lose the ability to be as creative and fresh and bright and present as you could be, and accessing all of the resources of who you are, bringing your intuitive intelligence and creativity to whatever it is that you're doing. Doesn't matter what it is. But by the way, being present with nothing else on your mind happens to be the most productive state to operate from. It's the best state to fire somebody from. It's the best state to be in when you cook from. It's the best state to be in when you're having a fun conversation or you're dancing. Being present. And so what happens is your creativity then goes to a place that do not allow you to be as creative or productive as you could be. In my experience, you're most creative and you're most productive when you have the freedom to make a mess. Oh, come on. Don't you like the freedom to just go crazy in the kitchen or in the meeting or in the whatever it is you're doing? That is the most creative time, from my experience, to be in, to be spontaneous. Follow your intuitive hunches. Yeah. Here's the problem. If you're in a mess, you can't make one. That's why the French chefs have a saying, mise en place. What does that mean? Before we start in the kitchen, everything had better be in order. Everything had better be in place. The food, the utensils, everything had better be spotless. Why? Because when the bell rings, it's going to get crazy. Yeah. And you want the freedom to get crazy. But believe me, if your kitchen is in a mess, you can't make one. That makes sense? If your life is in a mess, you can't make one. If your desk is in a mess, you're not probably going to be able to be as creative at your desk if you would like to be. So the trick there is to make sure that you clean up in a certain way. And I don't mean taking all your time to do that, but what happens is if you don't do that, there's a lot of stuff that starts to occur to you. And one of the things that you're missing then is the ability to focus on what you need to focus on appropriately. That's one of the absolute keys to productivity, is your focus. Your ability to focus on the ball you're hitting, on the meeting agenda, on the result you're trying to produce with whatever it is that you're doing. The other thing that you're going to miss is what I refer to as control. Now, when I say control, I don't know how it translates into Russian. I don't mean trying to control the weather, or your boss, or your kids. Good luck. I'm talking about having something under control, like driving your car. And under control so there's enough stability to be able to point where you want to go and do what you want to do without being totally distracted by that. So those are the two key elements, really, of productivity, are focus, or perspective, and control. So if you map those two together, by the way, have any of you ever worked with consultants? Any ever had consultants, or are any of you consultants? Consultants, they haven't found this out yet, but they will. The consultants don't have double helixes in their DNA. They have 2x2 matrices. Every consultant's got theirs. So here's mine. So let's say control and perspective. If you map those together, on the bottom left-hand side, you have no control and no perspective. What's that? Well, that's your basic victim state of mind. Any of you ever been there? Felt no control, no perspective. Oh, me, regularly. Oftentimes you throw yourself out of control and out of focus by your own productivity and your own creativity. So there's nothing wrong with being in that quadrant. You just don't want to stay there very long. Now, if you have, let's say, the upper left quadrant, and the upper left quadrant, what do you have? Well, that's where you have high perspective, but no control. What's that? Well, in English, we call that a crazy maker. I don't know how that translates, but basically they're the person going, oh, let's do this. Oh, wait a minute, we could do this too. Oh, here's another idea. Oh, let's do that. Some of you are married to one, some of you are one. I'll bet. We've all been there from time to time. Come on, any of you ever just been inspired and crazy and you sort of blew the hell out of everybody around you in terms of what you created? Now, in the bottom right-hand quadrant, what do you have? You have someone who has a lot of control, but no focus or perspective. What's that? That's your basic micromanagement. Down in the weeds. We got a problem? Oh, I know. Let's create 14 more policies and build 3 manuals about how to do something. That'll fix it all. Right. By the way, too controlled is out of control. No flexibility, no freedom, no spontaneity. Now, what about those 3 states? And we've all been in all of these from time to time. What about that? Well, the issue with those 3 states is if you're in any one of those states, you're not ready for surprise. You're not optimally able to deal with what's coming toward you. You're going to tend to overreact or underreact to whatever you're being presented with. So it's not the optimal state to be in if you want to be productive. You want to be present. So what? Well, you might say, look, David, life is fine. I'm doing okay. You probably wouldn't be in this room if your life wasn't already pretty nice, right? I understand that. And most people, however, don't realize how much better it could be if you were able to really do this really, really well. See, most everybody has all the behaviors already that I'm talking about. I just uncovered what those behaviors come from when you're really in stress-free productivity and found what the underlying principles that are at play and made those principles more conscious so you could do them with more elegance and more consistency. For instance, how many of you in here have at any point in time ever felt at least slightly confused or overwhelmed and you sat down and you made a list? Any of you ever make lists and feel better when you did? Okay. Then if you reverse engineered that, you'd never keep anything in your head the rest of your life. And I don't. By the way, nothing changed when you made a list. Nothing changed, except the most important thing for you to change, which is how you are engaged with your world changed when you did that. That's the essence of it. See, the world is fine. Just look, it's not overwhelmed. It's fine. The weather's fine. It's not overwhelmed. The world is fine. It's about how we are engaged with our world that makes all the difference in the world in terms of your productivity, in terms of your health, in terms of how happy you are, in terms of how balanced you are. So, what does better mean? And what would it look like? Well, it's kind of like nature doesn't need to do anything different. It's a very natural process. You know, it gets a lot done without a whole lot of stress. Probably none, if you look at it that way. And it doesn't rush, it just gets a lot of stuff done. So the ideal place, obviously, to be is in the upper right quadrant, where you've got the appropriate amount of control and the appropriate amount of focus and perspective. In that place, you get the opportunity to absolutely access optimal creativity. You get the opportunity to be, engaged with your life in the most appropriate way. And you're going to be ready for whatever's coming toward you in the most optimal way to be able to do that. So that's a nice place to be. How do you get there? Well, what there looks like, and this I will hold you to holding an image for yourself. You've probably been there before. I steal this image from the martial arts. I did get a black belt in karate many years ago when I was in my 20s. And in the martial arts, there's an idea, mind like water. Bruce Lee, his sensei, used that phrase, I think, and I stole that from him. And water, why water as a metaphor? Well, water appropriately engages with its environment. Water's not confused how to be. It could be in a lot of different states, but it's not confused. It's totally present with whatever it's engaged with. But if you're taking one meeting to the next in your mind, or you're taking home to work in your mind, or work to home in your mind, you are not in a mind like water state. See, in the high-level trainings of the martial arts, many times there are meditative kind of exercises. There may be a spiritual component to it, but there's a very practical component to it for sure. What's that? When 4 people attack you in a dark alley, you do not want 2,000 unprocessed emails hanging in your head. You need to be fully present, and then present, and then present, and then present. And let's go have some kava. Or whatever. That's the state to be in. And it is not just some dreamlike state to be in. You might be running a marathon in this state. You might be meditating in this state. Being in that state is the coolest place to be, but it doesn't show up by itself. You actually need to work on and do the things you need to do to be able to maintain the focus and to maintain your attention. You've probably heard a lot about attention already. You're going to hear a lot more. Time management is not about managing time. You can't manage time. You don't mismanage 5 minutes and wind up with 6 or 4.5. What do you manage? You manage your attention. What am I doing right now? Where am I putting my focus and my activity? It's really about attention management, really more than anything else. And how do I get that focus? Here's the interesting thing about it, is that if you don't pay attention to what has your attention, it will start to take more of your attention than it deserves. I'll say that again. If you don't pay attention appropriately to what has your attention, it will start to take more of your attention than it deserves. So a lot of what I discovered over these years seems counterintuitive. I need to manage the dumb, dorky, little weird stuff in my life as much as the big stuff, because if I don't, the dorky, little weird stuff is going to start to exhaust energy that's not available for the big stuff. That makes sense? So in a way, you need to be as rigorous with how you handle the little things that have your attention, as well as the big ones. If the thought, I need cat food, pops into your head more than once, you are inappropriately engaged with your cat. Right? Why did it pop into your head to begin with? The cat needs food. Why did it pop in again? Because you didn't manage that. Managing doesn't mean you stop everything and go to the store and buy cat food. It may just mean you put cat food on a Post-it, on a sticky note on the refrigerator, so whoever goes out that could go by the store gets cat food. Yay! Now come on, you all do versions of this already. It's just you need to start to pay attention to how many other things you could be doing this about in your life and work to then give you that sense of freedom and the kind of attention that you really want to have available. So let me give you the keys, the how-tos. Key number 1, you need to make sure that anything that has your attention gets captured in some sort of external trusted way. Write it down. Right? Record it. Do something. Get it out of your head. The cognitive scientists in the last 10 or 15 years have now researched and proven what I discovered 35 years ago, which your head is a crappy office. Your brain did not evolve to remember, remind, prioritize, or manage relationships with more than guess how many things before you start to lose your cognitive abilities. 4. That's it. And if any of you have more than 4 things just on your mind about your life and work right now, you will tend to be driven and make choices off what's latest and what's loudest, not by strategic, intuitive judgment. Does that make sense? Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just letting you know that will sub-optimize your life and your work if you're using your head to remember and remind. Your brain evolved to do very, very cool stuff. It evolved to recognize in your current reality patterns based upon long-term history, so that when you come in here, you say, oh, that's a table. Oh, that's a glass. That's a person. That's a microphone, instead of vibrations of light and sound, because that's all they are. But your brain is doing brilliant things. That's how you survived on the desert and in the jungle and the savannah. Was your brain recognized that's a tiger, or could be. Oh, there are berries to eat in that bush. There's a thunderstorm coming. Oh, you're brilliant. Computers can barely even start to do that. And you're doing it right now, brilliantly. And yet you go to the store for lemons, you come back with 6 things and no lemons. Ever do that? What happened? You were just trying to trust your head as your office. It doesn't work. So a very practical key, folks, is keep everything out of your head. And there are lots of tools to do that, but there's no better tool than a pen and paper. If you followed me around in my life, you would see me use a tool I've used for 35 years. Right there. Pen and paper. That doesn't stay there, but I grab ideas, possibilities, commitments that I make so I don't lose them. By the way, the more mature you get, the more good ideas will not happen where you're going to implement that idea. You'll be buying bread at the store thinking of something to bring up in the marketing meeting. You'll be in the marketing meeting remembering you need bread. So if you only want to have those thoughts once, you had better learn to capture and better have a capture tool. And I'm sure most of you do, of some sort. Anyway, so capture. We can talk more about that because I'll give you some time to ask some questions and we can chat about these basic principles. But that's a big, big, big key, is keep that stuff out of your head. Now, I'm looking at mine in English here. It makes it easier to see. How long does it take to get your head empty if you wanted to do that? In my experience in coaching hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, spending thousands of hours one-on-one with them at their desk implementing this methodology, the average time it takes for someone to empty their head is 1 to 6 hours. That's not prioritized, that's not organized, that's just record what's going on in their head. So I would highly recommend that if you're inspired at all, sooner than later, you do that exercise for and with yourself. Just sit down, grab pen and paper, and empty your head. Little things, big things, personal things, professional things, doesn't matter. And just in your head, cat food will take up as much room as new business plan. And either one will wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning when you can't do anything about them. So that's a master key, is just making sure that you get your head empty. By the way, when you do that, watch what happens to your energy. If you think your life improved when you made a list, wait till you make this list and see how that feels. Never seen an exception that when somebody did that. I've seen people lose 3 pounds just in 2 days, simply by unloading everything out of their head. You could have fooled me. The second thing you need to do is to decide what's on that list, what specifically you're going to do about them. Most of you in here probably have something that looks like a to-do list, I imagine. But if you pulled out your to-do list right now, what I'm going to see is probably an incomplete list of still unclear things. Usually what you see on to-do lists are things like mom, bank, tooth, vice president. That's great. You captured something that has your attention. Why did you write it on the list? Well, mom's birthday is coming. What are you going to do about mom's birthday? I don't know. And many of the to-do lists actually create as much stress as they relieve, because all you're doing is reminding you of stuff that you have not yet defined exactly what the work is embedded in that commitment. What's the action? What's the outcome? What are you going to do about mom's birthday? Oh, give mom birthday party. Ah, now you have defined the outcome you're committed to. What's the next action you would need to take to move on that? I should call my sister, see what she thinks about mom's birthday. Great. Now, much like in football, if you watch a football game, guess what the two things are on a player's mind when they're on the field? Where's the goal? What's the next play? Where's the goal? What's the next play? So if I were to coach any of you personally, I would just have you pull out anything you call a to-do list, and we're going to go through the definition of the work there, which probably still has not been done yet. Because even though it takes 1 to 6 hours just to identify what's on people's minds, it takes another 10 to 12 hours for people to actually make those decisions about outcomes and actions about what's on their lists. I know I have spent thousands of hours going through that exercise with some of the, by the way, smartest, brightest, busiest people you would ever meet on the planet. So watch what happens if you do that. If you take everything that you wrote down and make a decision about what you're going to do about it, it's amazing then what happens to your mind. So outcome and action, that's the basics of productivity. What are we trying to produce? What's the next step? Any of you ever been in a meeting that people didn't clarify what the objective of the meeting was? By what time? What do we want to have true at the end of this hour? Ever been in a meeting where people talked and they talked and they talked and they talked and they didn't make decisions about what exactly they decided or who was going to do what about it? Huge drain of energy and huge increase in exhaustion and lack of productivity is simply because people are missing outcome and action thinking, which is really critical. Then, of course, what you need to do is keep track of those decisions. If you can't call your sister about mom's birthday right now, where are you going to park that reminder to do it? So a map would be simply any list of things that keeps track of the commitments you've got. Right? What are all the calls you need to make? What are all the errands you need to run? What are all the things you need to talk to your life partner about the next time you talk to him or her? What are all the things that you need to do at your computer? What are all the websites you told yourself you need to surf and research? Where is that map? Where are those maps? If you have looked at your calendar for the last 2 days, I imagine you did to know this was going on, right? What was that? It was a map. You stepped back, you looked at it so you could locate yourself in space and time. No kidding. So you're already doing that behavior. If you keep a calendar, you're already admitting your head can't do it, and you need to use that to maintain appropriate perspective in your life. It's just that your calendars usually only hold about 5% of your life in terms of your commitments. I've got the rest of those 95% in the same kind of maps, out of my head, already decided in some place I can look at them. By the way, you can only feel good about what you're not doing when you know what you're not doing. So if you can't look in 60 seconds and see an inventory of everything you're not doing today, that's why some part of you is not fully here. If you want to be fully here, look at all that and go, no, I'm going to be here. That's why there's almost nothing ever on my mind. Doesn't mean that I'm making all the right choices, but I'm making the best choice I can, and I'm present with whatever it is I'm doing. Nice place to operate from. So if you have the right maps, then how does that feel? Same way, really cool. And if you have those maps and that is you're organized appropriately, then watch how that feels. And you've all been there before. I'm sure some of you are probably there right now. It's just most people have a good improvement opportunity to do that a good bit more. So don't worry. This is not hard to get rid of the kind of old, creaky, non-creative sort of psychic places. It's not hard to do that. But it's not, you're not born doing it. You actually have to do things to do it. What do? Well, you basically need to when it moves. Hello, hello. Is it going to move or not? There we go. Whoops. Well, here are the keys. Basically, keep stuff out of your head. Decide outcomes and actions of the things you're going to move on. Park the results in some appropriate place that you trust you can look at the right time. And make sure you've got good maps to look at. When you do that, then navigating your life becomes like captain and commander place. You're actually appropriately engaged. Doesn't mean this is always easy. Believe me, if you're ever sailing in a sailboat, it can be challenging from time to time, but it can also be quite fun, especially if you're in control of the boat, especially if you've got it under control and you're appropriately focused in terms of what you're doing. Not only that, you also then need to make sure you keep the boat clean and you keep this current. So at least once a week, if you're like me, I sit down and take 1 to 2 hours and clean up. I bring up the rear guard, as we say, and clean up and get current. I'll bet every one of us in this room has had something occur in the last 2 or 3 days that you know you need to handle or do something about, but you haven't yet had time to sit down and figure out exactly what the project or outcome is or the action step. You just know you've got it. When are you going to do that? When are you going to apply this cognitive process that's required in order to really be clear about your life? So that's the overview, the simple way to really understand what this methodology is, folks. Keep stuff out of your head. Sooner than later, decide exactly what it means and exactly what you're going to do about it. Park the results in some trusted external brain that you trust you'll see, and keep current with the current information as an inventory of your life. Step back and reflect on that on a regular basis, and then feel comfortable about whatever it is you're doing at any point in time. It's possible to do, but again, it's not free. You're not born doing this. It's something you actually learn to do and can make much more habitual in your life. So back to my story, my girlfriend did not stay my girlfriend very long. After that sailboat adventure, she became my wife. And so then we spent the last 30 years with lots of adventures of that. She's 60, I'm 74, so we're still sailing through life with the same kind of adventures, but we kind of know how to address them and deal with them these days. So that's the end of the story there. So I'd like to engage you now in conversation. Any questions you may have for me about any of this, I'm very happy to talk to you about it now. So I've got also some headphones somewhere. Oh, they're over here. So if you have questions, if it's not in English, please feel free to do it in Russian, and our translator will do a good job of letting me know. So.
Красуночки, оплески, будь ласка, Дэвіду Аллену. Запитання, відповіді на англійською, українською, whatever. Давайте, хто найсміливіший у нас сьогодні? Іночка Кован, доброго ранку.
Just to follow up, could you please recommend a few tools of where to record those thoughts and maps?
Yeah, recommending of tools. First of all, for capturing, I recommend low-tech. You know, pen and paper, you can't beat it. I don't have to turn anything on. I don't need batteries. I don't need Wi-Fi. There are no clicks to do this. This is not the permanent system. This is the capture system.
What is written here, actually? Needs.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it's a thought. I'm not sure what I'll do with it. I'll decide later. Yeah, but that's what those are. Tashiko. That's the woman's name in the new Japanese restaurant in our neighborhood. And it's nice to remember her name, right? I always forget. So that will go in my system, so next time I go, I'll say, Tashiko, nice to see you. It's great. So that's what that's for. You can record, you can capture digitally. The problem is the digital world is like a black hole. Where are you going to put it? It's okay if you have the discipline to then empty where you put it every 24 to 48 hours, like I do this, or my own in tray and my own in basket. In terms of reminders and lists, you just need a list manager. Mostly all you need are lists. So anything that manages lists are good tools. Now, for 20 years, I used a paper planner. That's probably the best list manager because you can just put a page in a loose leaf notebook and call it calls to make, or errands to run, or things to bring up at the board meeting. and make separate pages for the different kinds of lists that you would want to have to be reminded about. It's in your face, very easy to get to. The digital world has a lot of advantages too. And out there are hundreds, quite literally hundreds of now list managers, and basically all they are managing lists. As a matter of fact, at last count, there were over 300 applications built around the Getting Things Done methodology. Not mine, just somebody said, wow, all we need are lists, and they just have different ways to do that. You could make your list in a Word document. You could do it in Excel. I know people that do that. You could do it in any one of those. So the best thing to do if you don't already have a tool to use is maybe surf the web and just, there are forums out there that talk a lot about this methodology and they have a lot of suggestions. Or meet somebody. You can talk to Slava or Sergey, our folks here, because they're doing trainings with people and assisting people getting onto tools. Outlook is one of the most common that people use because their companies use that. And you can use that to manage lists if you want to. But there are lots of options out there in that regard. And then reference material, I use Evernote just to keep checklists and to keep reference material of all sorts. So just like I always did, it's just the digital world makes some of that a little bit easier. Yeah, good question.
Thank you. Next one.
Сложнее всего к результату привести человеческое общение, переговоры. Тоже приходить на переговоры за списком? Или какую рекомендацию дадите, чтобы из живого общения добиться результата?
Well, in any interaction, the best thing to do is to have a desired result in your mind that you want to achieve. That could be with a business negotiation, it could be with your life partner, it could be with your kids. What would you like to have true? And that could also include how would you like yourself to feel and them too, as well as any other physical result. So once you have the outcome in mind, then you just need whatever you need to get from here to there. That may be a list of agenda items to go over with them. And that may or may not need to be something you need to write down if it's only one or two things. But I keep a list for my wife. She keeps a list for me. So, yeah.
Anything else? Okay, nothing.
Добрый день. Я бы очень хотела узнать, вот есть список, мы его пишем, кладем его на лист. И, как правило, в этом списке оказывается много различных дел. Они связаны с семьей, как вы сказали, с работой, с бизнесом, с домом. Скажите, пожалуйста, как вы расставляете приоритетность выполнения этих дел? Спасибо. И рекомендация ваша, как лучше?
If I had a simple answer to that, I would make a lot more money than I am. The first thing to do is to get your head empty of all your commitments so you can see the bigger picture. I've never worked with an executive that spent 2 days with me and got their head empty and got a complete projects list that didn't automatically know a whole lot better about what their priorities were. I didn't tell them. All they had to do was get clearer internally so they could then see it from a larger perspective. Now, that said, there are 6 horizons or levels of commitments you have with yourself. The top level would be, what's your commitment to fulfill in terms of your life purpose? Why are you here? How are you doing as a human being? What grade do you give yourself? Right? So that's one level of commitment, is fulfill your purpose. That could also be about your company if you have one. What's the purpose of the company? That's the top level of commitments that we have that would set your priorities. You don't want to be off purpose. Is sitting here in this room right now on purpose for you? Well, knowing what your purpose is would make that a little easier to answer. But even if you know your purpose, would that help you decide which email to write first? A little bit. You're also going to need to get another level of commitment clear, which is what's your vision of fulfilling your purpose successfully? Where do you want to be 3 years or 5 years from now, career-wise, professionally, personally? What do you want to have true? What would wild success for you mean? That's another thing that we need to get done, and it's another thing to be aware of. If knowing that vision, and if that's clear to you, would that help you decide which email to write first? A little bit more. Then you have another level that says, what do I need to accomplish over the next 3 months to 24 months to make my vision happen? If you're in the professional world, that's usually organizational plans or operational plans over the next year or two. So what do you need to accomplish by the end of this year or by the end of next year to make your vision happen? If you have that clear, that list of objectives and and goals, is that going to help you decide which email to write first? A little bit more. But then you have a whole level we call the areas of focus and interest and accountability of the things you need to maintain so you can get where you want to go. How's your health? How are your finances? How's your relationships? How's your fun factor? How's all of that? If you're involved in a company, how are sales? How's staff development? How's asset management? How's quality control? How's customer service? You never finish those things. Those are just areas that need to be maintained at certain levels so you can get where you want to go. If you know what all that is, will that help you decide which email to write first? A little bit more. Then you have all the things you're committed to finish about all of that I just said. The 50, 60, or 70 projects you have. If you have that list in front of you, will that help you decide which email to write first? A lot more. And then, what are all the actions you need to take about any of that? The emails you need to send, the phone calls you need to make, the websites you need to surf, the things you need to buy at the store, the things you need to talk to your people about. Most of you have between 150 and 220 of those right now. If you knew what all of those were, would that help you decide which email to write first? A lot more. So whichever one of those levels you think you might need to go to ask yourself, am I operating at the highest priority for myself? Only you could answer that. That's why I said I'd love to give you a simple answer. I gave it as simple as I could. But what I've discovered is that most people have a much better sense of their priorities once they get their head clear. See, if your day-to-day life is feeling somewhat unstable and out of control, setting a goal in the future is just going to add guilt and frustration and more stress. So our methodology is about dealing with what is right now, not what should be. So if you get what is under control, what should be becomes much clearer to you, organically, naturally. Best answer I could give you in a short time.
Дякую, Дэвиде. Дякую за запитання. Мікрофончик в кого? Передайте, будь ласка. Дякую. Мама, от за вами.
David, thank you for a nice talk.
Дякую за
Very
допомогу. Дуже
interesting and very short book. Yes, let's say book of. Sorry, my English is more. Okay,
Do
I
it.
have this kind of
У мене
question.
ось таке питання.
You look very happy in your marriage, and when you speak about your wife in the lecture for women,
Про
it
жінку
means
для
you are
жінок,
happy.
значить, що ви щасливі.
So how does GTD help you to be happy,
Як
to
життя
live happy family
допомагає
life?
бути
Maybe
вам
you have some
щасливим,
practical
мати щасливу
advices,
сім'ю, якісь практичні є поради, якісь цікаві
secrets
секрети
for women,
для жінок.
not in general.
Загалом секрет.
Get clear. Get clear yourself.
Да.
Get clear so that some part of you can access your intuitive intelligence, your sensitivity, your creativity. Because you can apply that to what you cook, you can apply that to your relationships, you can apply that to anything. interesting because people ask me, what kind of system does my wife have? I have no idea. I don't care. I just know where her in basket is. She knows where my in basket is. And we just manage the business of life in a very elegant, very clean way. I will email my wife even though I can see her. Why? Why should I interrupt her and force her to make a decision about something that she might need or want to think about that may not be her priority in the moment? People say, gee, David, that sounds so mechanical. And I say, well, if you don't handle mechanical things in a mechanical way, they will start to make your relationships mechanical. Gee, dear, did you handle that? I thought you were going to, oh my God. And that will screw up a relationship as fast as anything. That also will screw up a business relationship, whether it's a man or a woman, fast, if you're not clear about your agreements with each other. Now, I didn't have to teach Catherine this stuff because she met me in my seminar 35 years ago. Right? So then she worked for me and she trained a lot of our coaches, so I know she knows this stuff. And it doesn't mean you don't have challenges. If you didn't have challenges, you wouldn't be able to really grow or expand or express yourself. But you just want to make sure that you're addressing it in a way that has to do with outcome and action. Gee, dear, what would we like to have true this weekend? How would we like to be together? And it may mean that you might need to have, difficult conversations, as they call them. If you're dealing with some sort of emotional issue or behavior that doesn't match your standards. And there's a lot of negotiation then you have to do that. See, everybody has a certain number of dirty glasses you will let mount up in your living room before you have to do something about it. Right? Some people, you put one thing down, they take it up. Some people won't take any, some people don't even notice it unless they can't find a clean glass anywhere else. Neither one of those is good or bad. The problem is when person A marries person B. Now you have an issue. Then, after 30 years, Catherine and I kind of have come to an agreement about how many dirty dishes can mount up before we have to clean up. It's kind of like if the sink gets more than one level, I'm in trouble, right? So I think a lot of that comes down to communication. And nothing hurts. There's nothing better than honesty, nothing better than loving. So if you can be loving and then honest and clear, that's the best I can tell anybody about anything, So good luck. Yeah.
Є запитання? Ні, немає. Добре. Можна мені мікрофончик?
May I have a microphone?
David, thank you so much.
Девіде, дуже дякую.
I believe next time you're welcome with your wife.
Oh, good.
You see? Because we want to multiply our project and one day in America. And with pleasure, if you don't mind, we'll invite your wife as a speaker.
Okay. She would love that, I'm sure. She's quite shy though, so you'd have to really coax her.
Так, красунечки, запитань до нашого Vision Guest вже немає? Тоді, давай, Олечка, я знаю, що ти вчора була на Global Inspiring Forum. От мені навіть цікаво, чи те, про що говорив вчора, і про що говорив сьогодні, Девід, він тримається в лінії?
Keep in line and provide different presentation today rather than yesterday, so it was interesting today. For me, for example, keeping things in mind is training memory on a day-to-day basis.
Щоденне тренування
What are the
пам'яті.
best tools for you to
Які є
train
найкращі
memory?
інструменти для
And then
тренування
what
пам'яті,
should I do for
що
myself to train memory?
що повинен я
If I
зробити,
make
щоб
notes
натренувати
and don't
пам'ять?
keep things
Ну,
in
наприклад,
my head.
якщо я роблю нотатки, а речі
Well,
не тримаю в голові.
I'm too lazy to try to memorize
Я
stuff.
такий лінивий, щоб запам'ятовувати.
I mean, I am trying to learn Dutch right now. So I have, yes, so I have a process of memorizing words and vocabulary, using flashcards and using a system for doing that. So there are techniques for memorizing if you want to or need to memorize stuff. But frankly, I sort of like Albert Einstein, brilliant guy. He said, why should I remember my phone number? I can look it up. There are better things to think about. So my question is, why do you want to increase your memory? For what reason? For me, your mind does not remember or remind very well. You can train your mind to remember stuff with certain kinds of techniques. But frankly, I like to keep my mind just really open and clear about anything, and then let myself access what my mind is good for, which is recognizing intuitive, intelligent stuff. So I would just say research that. I'm not an expert in memory. There are people who are. Well, one technique, for instance, would be instead of taking notes while I'm talking, within half an hour after you leave, write down everything you remember about what I said. A friend of mine is an expert at that stuff, and he said that's one of the best things to do. If you're listening to information and you want to recall key elements of it, don't take notes while you're listening, because then you lose the flow of what the content is. But afterwards, very shortly, then use your mind to remember the things that were most memorable to you and write those down. Yeah.
Дэвид, у мене є запитання. А коли ви останній раз стресували, реально? Ну, окрім того, коли зайшли і побачили таку кількість красунь на одній локації.
Well, there's positive stress and negative stress.
Позитивний стрес і негативний стрес.
Positive stress says, I want to be out of the room. I'm not out of the room. I need to get out of the room. That is a dissonance that is actually how things get produced. If you set a goal, that creates a kind of a stress until you can achieve the goal. So that's a positive use of the stress factor itself. Negative stress would say, I want to be out of the room. No, I want to sit here. Oh, damn, I what? No. That will produce an ulcer. So that kind of stress, I don't experience very much at all. I can't remember the last time I had that kind of stress. Yeah, well, I've got a big project right now that has so many moving parts on it that until I can sit down and get control of what's happened in the last 24 hours, there's a part of me that's feeling kind of stressed. But very soon I will actually get to a place where I can do that. If nothing else, I'll do it on the plane to Amsterdam, where I live tomorrow. But I will have things that I do need to do because I've got that feeling that those things need to be put to rest. But, you know, I'm as appropriately engaged with it as I can be, so I haven't even thought about that till you asked.
Ваша методологія, вона унісекс? Чи все ж таки жінкам легше бути структурованою? Можливо, чоловікам.
Over all of these 35 years, I've never seen a gender difference. There's more difference between you and your next door neighbor than there is between you or, you know, some man. There's in terms of how much you apply this methodology. It's true that a lot of women, especially if they have raised a family and had the role of mom and had to manage all of that stuff as well as a career, have a lot more things spinning in the air that they've had to learn to manage really well. Sometimes, though, those women don't think they need this because they think they're really good at it. So, but I've worked with many of them that once they see this, and once we go through the process, they go, oh my God, you know, this could be a whole lot easier than I've made it. I think in terms of male role and female role, yeah, there's probably a little bit of difference in most people's history and their conditioning about that. But if you're really good at managing detail, you may not be that good at taking risk for setting goals and vision. If you really like the goal setting and visioning and you hate the details, everybody's probably got a weaker suit on one side or the other. But frankly, I haven't seen that be a gender difference. I've seen as many women that are high visionaries that hate detail as I've seen women that love detail and hate the vision stuff or, you know, scared of it. So
Символічно, власне, наша нетворкінг-платформа називається Vision Club. Це Дэвид. За ці 35 років, тут і зараз, сьогодні. What is your main vision?
Well, certainly professionally and career-wise, our work, my vision is to create a world where there are no problems, only projects. Because if you're in problem mode, you're in victim mode. So, you know, and believe it or not, as simple as this may sound, I don't have to, you know, challenge you to grow yourself personally or to be inspired by some vision. All I have to do is pick up stuff in your handbags or your purses or on your desk and ask you, what is this? Why is this here? What does it mean to you? And instead of it yelling at you, you start to get in control of it. So it gets you, throws you into the driver's seat of your life instead of being reactive to it. You're responsive to it. Very different. And so even these simple little practices actually switches people into, okay, what do I want to have true? And what do I need to do next to make it so? That's not necessarily easy, but it certainly makes it identifiable in terms of how to engage with it appropriately. People have often asked, how old does a kid need to be to learn this? I say, well, how old do they need to be to understand the question, what would you like to have true about the birthday party? What do you think we need to do to make that happen? As soon as they're old enough to answer those questions, they are old enough to be trained to make projects, not problems. So, you know, I don't know that how much of the world I will see happen. You know, I don't know, at 74, I may have a few more miles on my tires, but that's the work that I'm doing. So I'm taking every advantage I can to make sure as many people in the world find out about this so they get in their own driver's seats of their life. That's the primary purpose. And just personally to access the highest levels of energy that I can and to express and manifest it as best I can.